Hi everyone, I'm Linda Reimer, one of the librarians at the Southeast Bend County Library. Welcome to Library Connections, our monthly new book alert video cast. Enjoy. Library Connections July 2023. Library Connections is now a monthly video cast highlighting notable new books coming out in the month ahead of us. This time around, it's new books coming out in July 2023. Our first hot new title is the latest by James Patterson with Brian Sitz. It's called Circle of Death. This is a shadow thriller. It's the shadow versus the end of the world. Nothing more, nothing less. Doomsday is coming as an evil mastermind plots to destroy all of humankind. Not even the shadow knows the enemy's true identity. But the clock is ticking, with people all over the world dropping dead each and every day. As the shadow gathers a small band of allies, he knows this is one fight he cannot lose, because anything else means the end of all life. And on a reader's note, this is the second book in the series. The first book, should you wish to dive in with book one, is simply titled The Shadow. Moving on to our first July 4th read, it's the new David Rosenfeld mystery, Flop Dead Gorgeous. This novel is part of the Andy Carpenter mystery series. So having said that, let's see what's going on in the world of Andy Carpenter. Lights, camera, action in best-selling author David Rosenfeld's Flop Dead Gorgeous, as Andy Carpenter goes bi-coastal to prove an old friend's innocence. Retired lawyer Andy Carpenter remembers every dog that's come through the Terra Foundation's doors. But the most well-known alum of the dog rescue organization that Andy founded in Paterson, New Jersey, may be Mamie. Adopted by famous actress Jenny Nichols, Andy's high school girlfriend, the miniature French poodle is now practically a starlet in her own right. Andy doesn't hold it against his friend. In fact, he and his wife Lori have dinner with Jenny while she's in town filming her next big hit. But after an eventful meal, there's a plot twist the next morning that none of them see coming. Jenny's co-star is found dead, a knife in his back, and it's not long before Jenny is arrested for the murder and finds herself in need of Andy's legal services. While Mamie becomes reacquainted with Tara, Andy's golden retriever, Andy digs into the lives of the rich and famous. This is the 27th book in the Andy Carpenter series. Should you wish to jump in and start reading from book one, the first book is called Open and Shut. Moving on to our next July 4th read, it's a thriller, The Long Ago by Michael Garrity. Let me tell you about the plot. Growing up in Montana in the 1950s, siblings Raymond and Barbara Lansdale held their chaotic world together through their shared childhood fantasy of the long ago, a distant place where happiness and tranquility reigned, far from the dysfunction at home. But imagination only goes so far. To escape his painful past, Ray joins the army and finds a career that gives him a sense of purpose and the promise of adventure. Recent news of his kid sister's disappearance brings Ray home on leave before beginning a stateside assignment almost certain to send him back into the jungles of Vietnam. Determined to find Barbara, despite a police investigation that has led nowhere, Ray embarks on a relentless search that takes him from the majestic Montana ranchlands and glitter of Hollywood to the mean streets of LA and beyond. As time dwindles, he must confront his worst nightmare. What if Barbara's search for the long ago ended in a shallow, unmarked grave, not in the carefree life she'd once so longed for and imagined? Now that's the kind of thriller I like. That one's definitely going on my reading list. Gotta wait until July 4th to read it, though. Moving on to July 11th releases, our first title is Evil Heart by Linda Castillo. This is the latest book in the Kate Burkholder series. So let's check in with Kate for an overview, via the overview of the plot, of course. On a crisp autumn day in Painter's Mill, Chief of Police Kate Burkholder responds to a call, only to discover an Amish man who has been violently killed with a crossbow, his body abandoned on a dirt road. Aidan Carn was just 20 years old, well-liked, and from an upstanding Amish family. Who would commit such a heinous crime against a young man whose life was just beginning? The more Kate gets to know his devastated family and the people, both English and Amish, who loved him, the more determined she becomes to solve the case. Aidan Carn was funny and hard-working, and looking forward to marrying his sweet fiancée, Emily. All the while, Kate's own wedding day to Tomasetti draws near. But as she delves into Carn's past, Kate begins to hear whispers about a dark side. What if Aidan Carn wasn't the wholesome young man everyone admired? Is it possible the rumors are a cruel campaign to blame the victim? Kate pursues every lead with a vengeance, sensing an unspeakable secret no one will broach. This is the 15th book in the Kate Burkholder series. If you'd like to dive in and start reading from the beginning, check out Book 1, Sworn to Silence. Our next new notable book is the new James Lee Burke novel, Flags on the Bayou. And this one is a bit of a thriller, a bit of a mystery. It's definitely historical fiction, as it's set in 1863. So having given you those little tidbits, let me tell you a little more about the plot. In the fall of 1863, the Union Army is in control of the Mississippi River. Much of Louisiana, including New Orleans and Baton Rouge, is occupied. The Confederate Army is retreating towards Texas and being replaced by Red Legs irregulars, commanded by a maniacal figure, and enslaved men and women are beginning to glimpse freedom. When Hannah LaVue, an enslaved woman working on the Lufkin plantation, is accused of murder, she goes on the run with Florence Milton, an abolitionist schoolteacher, dodging the local constable and the slave catchers that prowl the bayous. Wade Lufkin, haunted by what he observed and did as a surgeon on the battlefield, has returned to his uncle's plantation to convalesce, where he becomes enraptured by Hannah. Flags on the Bayou is an engaging, action-packed narrative that includes a duel that ends in disaster. a brutal encounter with the local Union commander, repeated skirmishes with Confederate irregulars, led by a diseased and probably deranged colonel, and a powerful story of love blossoming between an unlikely pair. As the story unfolds, it illuminates a past that reflects our present in sharp relief. Wow, there's a lot going on in that novel. You'll have to have, either a glass of wine or a cup of coffee before you read that, depending upon whether you want to relax while you're being bombarded with the plot or, wake up. Not that you have to be super awake to read a book, but if you're going to read Flags on the Bayou, you might want to keep track of the plot, so that might require coffee. But now we're going to move on to our next recommended read, coming out July 11th, and this one is a romance. Because it's summertime, you gotta have some romance. This is Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. Love isn't blind, it's just a little blurry. Sadie Montgomery never saw what was coming, literally. 1 minute she's celebrating the biggest achievement of her life, placing as a finalist in the North American Portrait Society competition, and the next, she's lying in a hospital bed, diagnosed with a probably temporary condition known as face blindness. She can see, but every face she looks at now is a jumbled puzzle of disconnected features. Imagine trying to read a book upside down and in another language. This is Sadie's new reality with every face she sees. But, because you knew there had to be a but as she struggles to cope, hang on to her artistic dream, work through major family issues, and take care of her beloved dog Peanut, she falls into love, lust, a temporary obsession to distract from the real problems in her life, with not one man, but two very different ones. The timing couldn't be worse. If only her life were a little more in focus, Sadie might be able to find her way. But perceiving anything clearly right now seems impossible. Even though there are things we can only find when we aren't looking. And there are people who show up when we least expect them. And there are always, always other ways of seeing. Our next notable read is the latest by Debbie Maycomber. This obviously is a romance. It's called Must Love Flowers. And the main protagonist, well, there's two of them. A younger gal is sort of a secondary protagonist, but the main character is Joan Sample, who is middle-aged. And being middle-aged myself, I always like that. But having digressed a little bit, let me tell you about Joan Sample and what's going on with her. Joan is not living the life she expected. Now a widow and an empty nester, she has become, by her own admission, something of a recluse. But after another birthday spent alone, she is finally inclined to listen to her sister, who has been begging Joan to re-engage with the world. With Emmy's support, Joan gathers the courage to take some long-awaited steps, hiring someone to tame her overgrown garden, joining a grief support group, and even renting out a room to a local college student. Before long, Joan is starting to feel a little like herself again. Across town, Maggie Herbert works mornings as a barista, tending to impatient customers before rushing to her afternoon nursing classes. She lives with her alcoholic father, ducking his temperamental outbursts and struggling to pay the household bills. But her circumstances brighten when she finds a room for rent in Joan's house. In the unexpected warmth of her new situation, Maggie finds a glimmer of hope for a better life. But will Maggie's budding attraction to one of her customers ruin the harmony she's only recently found with Joan? Meanwhile, what is Joan to make of the mysterious landscaper who's been revitalizing her garden? A man who seems to harbor a past loss of his own. As Maggie and Joan confront difficult life choices, they draw strength from this new friendship in surprising ways, discovering in the process that found family is often the very best kind. Our next notable new book is The Paris Agent by Kelly Rimmer. This one is historical fiction. It's set in two different time periods, both in the past, in World War II era and 25 years after that, and features the main character Noah Ainsworth and his daughter. So having said that, let's dig into that overview of the plot a little bit. The book is set 25 years after the end of the war, and Noah Ainsworth is still preoccupied with those perilous, exhilarating years as a British SOE operative in France. A head injury, sustained on his final operation, has caused frustrating gaps in his memory, in particular about the agent who saved his life during that mission gone wrong, whose real name he never knew, nor whether she even survived the war. Moved by her father's frustration, Noah's daughter, Charlotte, begins a search for answers that resurrects the stories of Chloe and Fleur, the code names for two otherwise ordinary women whose lives intersected in 1943 when they were called up by the SOE for deployment in France. Taking enormous risks to support the Allied troops, with very little information or resources, the women have no idea they're at the mercy of a double agent among them who's causing chaos within the French circuits, whose efforts will affect the outcome of their lives and the war. But as Charlotte's search for answers bears fruit, overlooked clues come to light about the identity of the double agent, with unsettling hints pointing close to home. And more shocking events are unearthed from the dangerous, dramatic last days of the war that led to Chloe and Fleur's eventual fates. So there's a suspenseful historical novel for your summer reading enjoyment. Our next notable new book is a romance by Jody Slaughter. It's called Play to Win. It focuses on Miriam Butler, who's been having a hard time lately. In fact, Miriam's life is going nowhere in the slowest, most excruciating way possible. Stuck in the same barely paying job she's had since she was 16, and spending every night sleeping in the spare twin bed in her mother's house, her existence might be hilarious if it wasn't so bleak. One trip to her favorite corner store upends everything when she finds herself the winner of a Mega Millions lottery jackpot. Unfortunately, not even life-altering roses come without their painful thorns. Hers just so happened to be in the form of an estranged husband who has the right to claim his share of her money. It's been 8 years since Leo Vaughn has had a conversation with his wife when she calls out of the blue, practically begging him to come back to Greenbelt. The last thing he expects her to tell him when he gets there is that she's come into a whole heap of money. She offers him a life-changing proposition of his own. Take a lump sum, finally sign the divorce papers, and be done with her for good. Only, another prime word for change, like but I digress, only a forever without her is the last thing Leo wants. So he gives her a proposition of his own, one that won't cost her nearly as many millions, but will buy the time to do the one thing he's been hungry to do since he left: win her back. That sounds eventful, to say the least. I'm not sure I'd be thrilled either with having to give my soon-to-be ex-husband half of my lottery winnings, but of course, somehow I don't think he's going to be her ex-husband. We'll have to read the book to find out for sure. Moving on to our next new and notable book. It's the new Dean Koontz novel, After Death. This, of course, is a supernatural thriller which focuses on a fella named Michael Mace. Michael being the head of security at a top-secret research facility. As the book opens, he opens his eyes in a makeshift morgue, 24 hours following an event in which everyone perished, including him and his best friend Shelby Shrewsbury. Having awakened with an extraordinary ability, unlike anything he or anyone else has ever imagined, Michael is capable of being as elusive as a ghost. He sets out to honor his late friend by helping Nina Dozier and her son John, whom Shelby greatly admired. Although what Michael does for Nina is life-changing, his actions also evoke the wrath of John's father, a member of one of the most violent street gangs in Los Angeles. But an even greater threat is descending: the Internal Security Agency's most vicious assassin, Duran Kalpis. Kalpis will stop at nothing to get his man, and if Michael dies twice, he will not live a third time. From the tarnished glamour of Beverly Hills, to the streets of South Central, to a walled estate in Rancho Santa Fe, only Michael can protect Nina and John and ensure that light survives in a rapidly darkening world. Our next notable new book is a prime one for summer. It's called The Block Party by Jamie Day. It focuses on residents of an exclusive cul-de-sac who wind up entangled in a web of secrets and scandal utterly unknown to the outside world and even to each other. On the night of the annual summer block party, there has been a murder. But who did it and why takes readers back 1 year earlier as rivalries and betrayals unfold, discovering that the real danger lies within their own block, and nothing and no one is ever as it seems. Sounds like a perfect lake read. Our next notable new book is the new Daniel Silva novel, The Collector. This is a Gabriel Allon novel. Gabriel Allon, of course, being a legendary art restorer and spy, who in this book joins forces with a brilliant and beautiful master thief to track down the world's most valuable missing painting, but soon finds himself in a desperate race to prevent an unthinkable conflict between Russia and the West. Silva's powerhouse novel showcases his outstanding skill and brilliant imagination, and is destined to be a must-read for both his multitude of fans and growing legions of converts. And on a reader's note, this is the 23rd book in the Gabriel Allon series. If you'd like to start reading the series from the beginning, check out Book 1, The Kill Artist. Our next notable new read is Crook Manifesto. The new novel by Colson Whitehead. This one is historical fiction, and like the prequel The Harlem Shuffle, it follows Ray Carney, a furniture store owner and ex-fence, who's trying to stay on the straight and narrow and not quite succeeding. In 1971, Ray needs Jackson 5 tickets for his daughter and approaches old police contact Munson, who naturally wants a favor in return. In 1973, Ray's partner in crime, Pepper, takes a side job doing security on a blaxploitation shoot in Harlem and manages to best the hustlers he meets. By 1976, while store owner Ray finds his way around raging bicentennialism, he asks Pepper to help discover who's behind a fire that injured one of Ray's tenants. Again, Whitehead delivers the portrait of one struggling community and roughed up but durably endearing 1970s New York. And that particular overview is actually from the Library Journal, because it was hard to find a short review of this book. But if you like historical fiction and just well-written fiction, check out the new Colson Whitehead novel coming July 18th. Our next new book is a historical thriller. It's called Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And I know the early 1990s doesn't seem that far away to a lot of us, but really that's history now, so we'll take it as historical fiction. Bestseller Moreno Garcia takes readers behind the scenes of 1993's Mexico City's horror movie industry in this powerful and chilling thrill ride. Lifelong film buffs Montserrat and Tristan have remained best friends since childhood, though their lives take very different turns, with Montserrat going into the underpaid and male-dominated audio editing space, and Tristan rising to and falling from soap opera stardom. Tristan finds a similarly fallen friend in his new neighbor Abel, a once legendary director whose career was destroyed by the unfinished mess of his last film. Abel claims the screenplay was written by Nazi occultist Wilhelm Ewers, who meant to use the film to cast a luck spell, but following Ewers' sudden death, the spell was inverted. Abel convinces Montserrat and Tristan that finishing the film with him will finish the original spell and bring them all luck, only for their endeavors to draw forth something very different from the dark. Combining real history with unsettling magic, Moreno Garcia effortlessly ties explorations of misogyny, addiction, anti-Semitism, and racism into a plot that never falters from its breakneck pace. The narrative shifts effortlessly between fantasy, horror, and romance, helmed by a well-shaded cast. The complex female characters are particular standouts. This is a knockout. And that's the Starred Publishers Weekly Review, and that one too is definitely going on my reading list. Silver Nitrate, coming out July 18th. Moving on to notable new books coming out July 25th, we have Michael Kurita's latest, An Honest Man, which follows Israel Pike. Pike was a killer, and he was an honest man. They were not mutually exclusive. After discovering 7 men murdered aboard their yacht, including 2 Senate rivals, Israel Pike is regarded as a prime suspect. A troubled man, infamous on Salvation Point Island for killing his own father a decade before, Israel has few options, no friends, and a life-threatening secret. Elsewhere on the island, 12-year-old Lyman Rankin seeks shelter from his alcoholic father in an abandoned house, only to discover that he isn't alone. A mysterious woman greets him with a hatchet and a promise. "Make a sound, and I'll kill you," she says. As the investigation barrels forward, Lyman, Israel, and the fate of the case collide in immutable ways. Written with mounting suspense, stirring emotion, and deep understanding of character, Corita continues to prove why Stephen King has called him a master, and Michael Connelly has deemed him one of the best, plain and simple. So if you like thrillers, check out An Honest Man, coming out July 25th. And our second new book coming out July 25th is the only nonfiction title on this list, but it's a good one. It's called Baking Yesteryear, The Best Recipes from the 1900s to the 1980s by B. Dylan Hollis. Friends of baking, are you sick and tired of making the same recipes again and again? Then look no further than this baking blast from the past, as B. Dylan Hollis highlights the most unique tasty treats of yesteryear. Travel back in time on a delicious decade-by-decade jaunt, as Dylan shows you how to bake vintage forgotten greats, with a big pinch of fun and a full cup of humor. You'll be baking everything from chocolate potato cake from the 1910s to avocado pie from the 1960s. Dylan has baked hundreds of recipes from countless antique cookbooks and selected only the best for this bake book, sharing the shining stars from each decade. And because some of the recipes Dylan shares on his widely popular social media channels are spectacular failures, he's thrown in a few of the most disastrously strange recipes for you to try if you dare. So if you're in the mood for baking this summer, check out the book Baking Yesteryear. Our next title is Prom Mom, the latest by Laura Lippman, and the main character's name is Amber Glass. And Amber has spent her entire adult life putting as much distance as possible between herself and her hometown of Baltimore, where she fears she will forever be known as Prom Mom, the girl who allegedly killed her baby on the night of the prom after her date Joe Simpson abandoned her to pursue the girl he really liked. But when circumstances bring Amber back to the city, she realizes she can have a second chance, as long as she stays away from Joe, now a successful commercial real estate developer, married to a plastic surgeon, Meredith, to whom he is devoted. The problem is, Amber can't stay away from Joe, and Joe finds that it is increasingly hard for him to ignore Amber, if only because she remembers the boy he was and the man he said he was going to be. Against the surreal backdrop of 2020 and early 2021, the two are slowly drawn to each other and eventually cross the line they've been trying not to cross. And you can imagine that chaos ensues. And if you want to find out what happens, you'll have to wait till July 25th. Our next title is Somebody's Fool by Richard Rousseau. This follows the Sully family and the characters in North Bath, which the author has written about in previous novels. 10 years after the death of the magnetic Donald Sully Sullivan, the town of North Bath is going through a major transition as it is annexed by its much wealthier neighbor, Schuyler Springs. Peter, Sully's son, is still grappling with his father's tremendous legacy, as well as his own relationship to his son Thomas, wondering if he has been all that different a father than Sully was to him. Meanwhile, the town's newly consolidated police department falls into the hands of Charisse Bond, after the resignation of Doug Reimer, the former police chief, and also, incidentally, Charisse's ex-lover. And then a decomposing body turns up in the abandoned hotel situated between the two towns. Charisse and Reimer are drawn together again and forced to address their complicated attraction to one another. Across town, Ruth, Sully's married ex-lover, and her daughter Janie struggle to understand Janie's daughter Tina and her growing obsession with Peter's other son, Will. Amidst the turmoil, the town's residents speculate on the identity of the unidentified body and wonder who among their number could have disappeared unnoticed. If used with all the wry humor and shrewd observations that Rousseau is known for, Somebody's Fool is another classic from a modern master. And our final new and notable book for July is the new novel Everyone is Lying by Shirley Le Pen. Welcome to Stanhope, a safe neighborhood, a place for families. William Wooler is a family man, on the surface, but he's been having an affair that ended horribly this afternoon at a motel up the road. So when he returns to his home, devastated and angry, to find his difficult 9-year-old daughter Avery unexpectedly home from school, William loses his temper. Hours later, Avery's family declares her missing. Suddenly, Stanhope doesn't feel so safe, and William isn't the only one on his street who's hiding a lie, as witnesses come forward with information that may or may not be true. Avery's neighbors become increasingly unhinged. Who took Avery Wooler? Nothing will prepare you for the truth. Well, that certainly sounds like a great summer mystery. Coming out July 25th, Everyone is Lying by Shirley Le Pen. Want more reading, listening, and viewing recommendations? Check out the Tech and Book Talk blog, which offers weekly and monthly recommendations, and the back catalog of Library Connections videos found on the Southeast Steuben County Library's YouTube page. And that's the program for this month. I'll be back next month with a new edition of Library Connections. Have a great month.